Ubisoft has not been good recently, and that is not speculation either. It's just a fact of life. And I'm also not just saying that because of game quality, even though that's also been doing pretty bad too. Ubisoft is currently in a position where if the next Assassin's Creed game doesn't do well, they might go out of business or get bought by Tencent. And there's already been rumors of Tencent buying them out if that happens. So, and personally, when I grew up, I was not a huge fan of Ubisoft titles like a lot of people were. I liked them, don't get me wrong. I did play a few of them. Like I like Assassin's Creed Black Flag, and I also like Far Cry 3. But once I tried like one Assassin's Creed game or like one Far Cry game, I pretty much stopped playing the games after that because they all felt the same. Like I tried Far Cry 4, but it felt the same. I didn't want to play the same game again. And if you like that kind of game, go for it. Play it. I don't care. I can't judge you, okay? I have like 1,000 hours in Factorio or something. And even though I was never a huge fan of Ubisoft, there was a point where I started to hate them, and it was Unity. So Ubisoft released Assassin's Creed Unity right after Black Flag and Rogue. And both those games were pretty good. I think Rogue got a lot of flack because it felt more like Black Flag DLC. But compared to Unity, both those games launched in a phenomenal state, okay? Unity launched in a terrible state because when they launched the game, it just wasn't finished. The game had a bunch of texture problems, it barely worked on any consoles, and the whole point with Unity was to be online co-op, and it didn't work for a good little bit on launch. It was a disaster. Now, in the grand scheme of things, this is not what made people hate Ubisoft. This is what made me hate Ubisoft. Okay, it's a bit different. I think most people started to hate Ubisoft when they lied about Watch Dogs. So the E3 trailer for Watch Dogs in 2012 showed an insane amount of detail. The AI movement was also insanely good. Overall, this trailer was insanely impressive. And this trailer released when I was 12 years old, okay? And at the time, I believed it because I was 12. But nowadays, I don't believe any ad until I actually see the real thing. Cough, cough, TeslaBot. But generally speaking, everyone believed this trailer because we didn't have much reason to doubt yet. Everything was on the up and up. I also wouldn't be surprised if they thought they could get the game to look like that within 4 years because that wasn't that crazy of a graphics leap back then. Like every console generation besides the Xbox Series X and PS5 has had a pretty massive graphical overhaul every iteration. So to me, it's not that crazy to think that Watch Dogs could actually look like that like 4 years from the trailer's release date. That doesn't seem that crazy to me. And as we know now in the game release, it looks nothing like it was promised. It doesn't look bad, but it's not what was promised at all. So yeah, picking a game trailer is not good PR. Who would have thought? And I think this is overall where people started being really critical of Ubisoft because yeah, that wasn't good. And then we had the Far Cry series, which is iconic for this clip.
Insanity is doing the exact same fucking thing over and over again, expecting shit to change.
As well as being iconic, the clip is also ironic because it's the exact same thing Ubisoft did with Far Cry. Yeah, they really did just make the same game over and over again. But realistically, Far Cry's okay. I just really think it's not a game for me. Like, I'm just not a fan of the gameplay loop of kill enemy, find tower, and expand map. It's just not my thing. But I don't really think any of the Far Cry games are like bad. I think they're just kind of like okay. And I think realistically, if you played Far Cry 6 and never played any of the previous ones, you would have a good time. But I think if you're buying Far Cry every release, you're not gonna have a good time. I don't know how you could do that. But realistically, Far Cry is the least of Ubisoft's problems. I think what Ubisoft did to Rainbow Six Siege is a lot worse. So, if you've never played Rainbow Six Siege, here's a little recap of how the game works. It's an objective-based team shooter, so you're usually either saving hostages or planting bombs. And personally, I never got into Rainbow Six Siege in the sense of like making it my mainstay multiplayer game. Like I played it a fair bit, but I didn't get into it like I did with Overwatch and like Deadlock. And I compare to those kind of games because Rainbow Six has that kind of fan base, and it's like the game they play in between major game releases. Like if they're waiting for Elden Ring 2, they're gonna be playing Rainbow Six. But I can see why people like Rainbow Six Siege, but Ubisoft thinks that shouldn't be the case. Pretty much every update they've made for the game has ruined it. First off, this game is a massive cheater problem that Ubisoft has really yet to address. In Ubisoft's defense, out of everything I've read about it, it is not an easy fix. It's something to do with the game engine being really old, and that makes it really vulnerable, and then cheaters have already infiltrated it, and basically, if they want to get rid of cheaters, they have to make a new game. That is from what I understand of the situation. I could be wrong. I'm not 100% sure. The cheater issue for me is not really 100% in their control. But what is in their control is this stupid Rainbow Six membership they added. This is a monthly subscription that costs $10 a month to the Rainbow Six Siege Battle Pass. Now, you get some other things besides the Battle Pass, but this is still pretty bad. Rainbow Six came out in 2015, so the fact that anyone is still playing this game means they like the game. So I don't know why Ubisoft is actively making decisions to get people to leave the game. Also, new players are not going to want to pay a monthly subscription for the Battle Pass. That has to be a deterrent, right? Like, if you launch a game for the first time and it says monthly subscription for Battle Pass, are you going to be interested in that game? Probably not, right? Monthly subscriptions were a hard sell for World of Warcraft, and that game is an MMO with tens of thousands of players online at all times. It makes sense in that game, and people still hate it. Ubisoft managed to do the thing that every company's been trying to do, which is make a mainstay online service game. And what does Ubisoft do? They ruin it. They ruin the game. But Ubisoft's attempt for live service games usually end in failure. Just look at The Division, for example, as well as Skull and Bones. And Skull and Bones is interesting because it's a quadruple A game according to Ubisoft, and almost no one likes this game. It kind of sucks. To make this game good, all Ubisoft had to do was make Black Flag, but a pirate game. That's literally it, and they couldn't do that. Even after 5 delays, they still released the game looking like this in a way no one wanted. I really don't know what they were thinking with this game. And I am personally annoyed at this one because I wanted this game to be Black Flag, okay? That's what I wanted. But no! But out of the people that did play Skull and Bones, the most common complaint was the game felt empty and it felt like you were wasting your time. And that kind of is Ubisoft's formula, isn't it? Make a game that has microtransactions in it and waste people's time. And if you want to get technical about it, okay. All games are technically a waste of time, but a game should be fun, not give the player existential dread. And the dumbest part about Skull and Bones is if Ubisoft just made it a Black Flag pirate game, everyone I know, including myself, would have been playing that game. But no, they made a pirate ship game where you play as the pirate ship. And in a similar vein of Skull and Bones, Ubisoft also messed up the crew. Now this is for different reasons, because from what I recall, people actually did like the crew for a good while. So the original crew game came out in 2014, pretty old title. And fast forward to present, and people have still been playing it. And Ubisoft didn't like that, so they revoked the license of the crew and also shut down the servers so people couldn't play the game anymore. The reason Ubisoft says this is okay is because when you buy a game, you don't technically buy it, you're leasing it or renting it. And that does make sense for the company that said they need to get gamers comfortable not owning their games. That makes a lot of sense. But unfortunately, they're right about that. I hate that they are. If you buy a digital license, you don't own the game. Valve also shows you now that when you buy a game, you don't actually own it, just to be clear. But it's always been this way. Game companies have just abused the fact that we've been ignorant of this entire time. Because why would they clarify it's in their best interest to think that we own the things that we're buying? That makes sense, right? But now Ubisoft is being sued in California for this because, yeah, no one's been making this clear up until very recently. But my point with this is this story has gotten so big that Ubisoft's brand image is now tied to shutting down games. A game company's brand image is tied to shutting down games. That's not going to cause any problems. And of course, the reason Ubisoft even pulled the crew to begin with is because they released like 2 different versions of the crew that are newer. But let me ask this. Why would anyone buy the new versions of the crew knowing the old one got pulled? And I'm aware that realistically, most people aren't going to play a game for 10 years. And it might be that the average gamer does not care because I don't think they do. But you better bet the loud minority is going to scream about this. And the average guy who was considering buying the game might see all the negativity and just decide not to. Over the last 10 years, I feel like most game companies and companies in general have just forgotten the fact that people talk to each other. And if every time you bring up Ubisoft in a conversation, people dog on their games, you're not going to think they make good games. If a company's reputation gets bad enough, you look like a clown defending them. And also, I think most people have played at least one game that everyone else has hated. And it's not fun. And what's also not fun is using Uplay. And if you're unfamiliar with Uplay, you've been blessed, first of all. And if you don't know what it is, it's Ubisoft's game launcher. And yeah, it's as bad as you think it is. I don't know a single person on Earth who has ever wanted or tried to buy a game from Uplay. It's terrible. And whenever you buy a Ubisoft game on Steam, you're forced to use the Uplay launcher, and it's the worst thing in the world. The only thing the Uplay launcher exists to do is cause problems and bug out your Steam. That is literally it. And the only reason it exists is because all these companies got super greedy, and they didn't want to give Steam the 30% cut of sale. This all started when EA made Origin, and then everyone else followed and made their terrible launchers, and now they're all dead and defunct because they're all bad. So basically, none of these companies use their launchers anymore, but since they baked them into the way their games work, you have to still use them. So even though it's not really being used anymore, you still have to use it to launch your games through Steam. And all it does is cause problems. It's like actually the worst thing in the world. I hate Uplay so much. But that leads us to Ubisoft's most recent mistake, which you might not have heard of because honestly, it's buried. Ubisoft released an NFT game called Champion Tactics. And I think this game has been a massive failure, and that's for good reason. As I said, this is an NFT game, and the champions are the NFT. And Ubisoft doesn't make the NFTs, but there is an NFT store. And on the NFT store, these champions range in cost from $7 to $63,000. And you might be wondering, if Ubisoft doesn't make the NFTs, what's in it for them? And they get a 6% cut of all NFTs sold in the store. That's what's in it for them. And apparently the game is decent, but when an in-game champion costs $63,000, you lost me. I'm not buying or playing your game literally ever. And the fact that most people don't really seem to care about this game is not good for Ubisoft at all. Because the one thing these companies have been producing consistently is outrage. And arguably, Champion Tactics is Ubisoft's most outrageous title to ever be released. And people don't even care enough to dog on the game, even though it's an NFT game in 2024. That should be enough reason for everyone to dog on it. Now, it could also be the fact that it's an NFT game in 2024 and no one cares because it's NFTs. That's also a factor, but still, this is a pretty egregious launch and no one seems to care at all, which is not good. Over the last 10-ish years, Ubisoft has only been making people angry. I don't remember a time where everyone was praising Ubisoft for a recent title, and they just assumed no one would care, and now they might be going out of business. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments down below, like and subscribe if you're new, and click the button down to check out more content, and have a good one.